EU-Turkey deal on local societies and their lives. Unfortunately, Amal Adwan, who is a Palestinian recognized refugee from Syria, will not be able to be with us today due to an illness. So we welcome Latsoudi from RSA. She has been honored with the Nansen Refugee Award in 2016. Welcome. We will try to connect with Parwana Amiri. She's a 17-year-old asylum-seeker from Afghanistan and also an activist, but there are some technical problems, but we will try soon to connect with her. We welcome also Irini Papachristou. She is a Samos resident and a member of the movement for human rights, solidarity for refugees. Giorgos Tyrikos-Ergas is also with us. He's a Lesvos resident, solidarian. Sofia Chatzifounda, co-resident, member of Kopp's anti-fascist movement. We will also hear a comment by Karl Kopp. He's director of European Affairs pro ASYL. During the event, we will watch a short film by Ahmad Ebrahimi, who is a recognized refugee from Afghanistan and a filmmaker. And we will also watch a video in which he talks about his experience. I think we are ready to begin with an introduction by Latsoudi for RSA. Latsoudi?
If it will be in a while, I suppose maybe we should proceed with the first speaker and when she's with us.
Okay. So we will have Effie in a few minutes. Let's go to Giorgos Tyrikos-Ergas. Giorgos, you have been in the solidarity movement for many years on the island of Lesvos. How do you think the deal has affected solidarity as a value in Lesvos society? And also, could you describe what has changed since 2015 and where are we now?
Okay. I'm very happy to be part of this conversation today. I would like to congratulate the RSA for the initiative. Since the beginning of the so-called refugee crisis, we were very skeptical towards the true role of Turkey. And actually Europe collaborating with Erdogan, a recognized tyrant and human rights oppressor, we understood that this will not end up well. The life in Lesvos has changed in 2015 in many ways. The EU deal actually was the keystone to create Lesvos, transform Lesvos to an open prison. Not only Lesvos, but also others in Greece, like Samos, Chios, and smaller islands. Living in an open prison is actually very, it's difficult for everyone. Difficult for locals. I would like to pass the general idea of what's going on right now and what has changed since 2015. In 2015, we were talking about Lesvos as the island of solidarity, and it was not just a narration. Actually, there were people on the street helping thousands of refugees that were disembarked on the island. Volunteers from all over Europe. Actually, the climate pro-refugee. Voices that were dead against refugees were few and isolated. By the years, Lesvos followed the rest of Europe and the world into the neo-fascist movement, a new form of demonization of refugees into nationalism. It happened all over the world, and it couldn't not happen in Lesvos. After turning Lesvos into a prison island, prison whole system. There are the guardians, there are people that hold the keys, the police officers that want to keep people locked up. Being in a prison has certain rules, and actually these rules were applied in Lesvos as well. Since then, as all over the world, the agenda was taken of extreme right voices. The political world, almost universally, is now emitting an anti-refugee speech and agenda. And actually, refugees, NGOs, and solidarians are part of a demonization effort. Actually, what must be noted and pointed out is that right now, being a solidarian in Lesvos means being on the target of a far-right agenda, means target even on the street, on the media, means being someone in a wishes to keep talking about refugee rights. The EU deal is part of a long process of colonization. Europeans as colonizers have a very good history, a very good record of creating prisons and of stopping people from coming towards the West unless they are wanted to. We understand that the EU-Turkey deal was part of the Europe Fortress idea and is part of the prevention of terrorism. We wish to make these life worth possible in order to deter. We are afraid that Europe, in collaboration with the Greek government, wish to maintain the status of prison in the Greek islands, and they maintain this status, but they also wish to expand this very moment. One of the issues here is whether a new camp will be created for refugees. We all know that it's nowhere. Simply Moria or have this people. I'm afraid my connection is bad. I must end the conversation here. I have referred to some elements of what means to be living in a prison, in an open prison like Lesvos.
Thank you very much, Giorgos. Now, Ahmad Ebrahimi is a recognized refugee from Afghanistan and also a filmmaker. He has been on Lesvos and now he's on the mainland Today, unfortunately, he could not attend the live discussion as announced because something related with his work occurred. But we have recorded his answer, and he will present, and we will present it now. Ahmad has friends who, until today, are trapped on the island, and others who have been transferred from Moria to mainland camps. We asked him how he sees the policy of migration management in camps, where people are trapped in temporary structures. Let's see what he answered.
I think they don't want people to have a good time. Because when I was also in Moria, there were many empty houses in Mytilene. There are a lot of empty houses in Mytilene, around Mytilene, and also in Athens, there is a lot of empty buildings that they just can put people inside the houses in the city. But I don't know what they think and how they want to, and what they want to say with this kind of policy. I think they just don't, like if they get a little bit easier for the people, they think maybe other people come to Greece again and again, more and more. I think that's why they're trying to put people in a very hard situation to avoid new people from new refugees from Turkey or from other countries. They are doing this, they are getting very hard. Otherwise, there is a lot of houses here around, and they can just put people inside the houses. Like if you walk, probably you know about this. If you walk in to Athens, there is 100 houses free, and also there is not a lot of refugee. Greece is very big country. Probably it would be around let's say 70,000 people. 70,000 people in the whole Greece is, I think, nothing, or 100,000 people is nothing. And also it is not very big deal for a government to manage like 100,000 people. But I think they don't care. They don't care because also they don't think about the kids, about the people who are like later on, who will be a part of this community, who will be a part of this country, and they don't think about their psychological problem. They don't think about if they keep them in a kind of that situation, like camps, what they will do in the future for their country, and how they train their kids, and when the kids grow up, like how they trade with this government. They don't think about this kind of from these angles, and they just don't care.
Okay.
The feeling is like how do you feel during the lockdown time? Like 3 months you were in lockdown, and how do you feel that? Like that feeling is very worse than this. When you are a refugee in a camp, like you don't know where to go, what to do, and there is nobody to answer your question. And there are some organizations, they are providing help, but also there are too many people that they cannot receive the help. And after you feel like you're alone in the middle of nowhere and you cannot do anything, and the feel is very strange, and I don't know how to explain it. It is the best way is to tell people to understand that kind of feeling is during the lockdown, during the Corona time, when they were when they cannot go out, when they cannot leave their house. And I think this is how you feel. You are not allowed to go anywhere. But our feeling is much bigger. Now I cannot leave this city because my paper is expired, and also I have been applied for new card 6 months ago, and I still don't have it. I cannot leave the city, and I'm afraid if some policemen don't know about this law, don't know about that our card is extended for many months now, they catch me, and I cannot leave the country. I cannot see my kids. Like, our feeling is much bigger than that, but it is a kind of feeling like during the lockdown, how people felt at that time. It is the same, but much bigger.
We've heard what Ahmad told us about the situation, his experience, and about his feelings. As we said earlier, Ahmad is also a filmmaker, so we can watch a short film of him right now. It's a really short film. Its duration is 5 minutes.
Look at this colorful, amazing planet. This is where we call home, and supposed to feel safe and free. But down here, things are complicated and tough. We don't feel safe, and we are not free. We are divided by colors, religions, parties, and borders. With the decision of some of us, they can make the lives of thousands of people miserable. One signature can destroy people's future. It's me, someone who you are calling refugee. My ancestors were from Africa. My mother was princess of Syria. My soul came from Afghanistan, and I had born in a small village in Iraq. My flesh is here, somewhere in Europe. Yes, I am refugee. The oceans have tasted my blood, and roads around the world know my footprints. All my paths lead to a big wall called the border. You may think we are as a cries in the throat of the world, but all the sorrows of the world end in my throat. It's not sweet home anymore. It feels like a cage. Even though life is short, but it's like the dark, long night is never going to end. It's me, a refugee. The colors of the sunset always amazed me. They remind me of my village. The breeze from the mountains, falling leaves from the mulberry trees, and the rain I felt on my cheeks, the silence of snowfall calming me. But it's different when you're living in a refugee camp. The sunset is not beautiful anymore. It's the beginning of a long, dark night. The breeze brings a painful cold. The falling leaves prove a miserable life passing fast. The rain crawls in your tent from everywhere, filling it with water. the children. Our children look to us with big eyes, red cheeks, their cold hands shivering. We are supposed to be their heroes. The hardest part of being a refugee is the uncertainty. When you don't know anything about your future and you don't find any reason to survive the next day, the next signature, or the next camp.
Very real, very strong, and very poetic. The short film of Ahmad that we've just watched. We could now invite Parwana. I think the technical problems are not exist anymore. Parwana Amiri is a 17-year-old.
Hello, can you?
Parwana?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, there are still problems with the connection, Parwana.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe we try later or not. Yes, I think that we should try later. I would like our guests to keep their microphones off when they're not talking, and we should try again with Parwana later. We have to see the technical problems. We present you Irini Papachristou. She's a Samos resident, member of the Movement for Human Rights and Solidarity for Refugees. Let's see how's the situation, Irini, from the motto Refugees Welcome of 2015. We reached the point of negative and hostile attitudes from parts of local communities. How did you get there, and which was the impact of the pandemic to the solidarity movement in Samos?
Well, good evening to everyone. I'm Irini. I have been living in Samos for the past 1.5 years. And let me get to the point straight away. That is the impact of the agreement between EU and Turkey on our island, on Samos. Well, Samos is not such a big place. It is, I would say, a rather small one, with issues of unemployment soaring constantly since the years of the crisis, as in the whole country, after all. The inability of the government and the local authorities to provide jobs to the local population was accentuated by the arrival of multitudes of people in boats on the coasts of the island. The locals blame the refugees and immigrants for the degradation of tourism that is the main source of income for many of them. And although these people buy whatever they need from local stores or rent their houses, the profit for the locals is often underestimated or completely forgotten on purpose most of the times. The extremely poor living conditions of immigrants and refugees here has also led to a number of interrelated situations. I mean, on the one hand, especially those with 2 rejections of their asylum application find themselves between a rock and a hard place. They are denied food, they are denied medication, and they turn to petty theft to simply survive. However, this enrages the locals, and I get the feeling that they also exaggerate very much in their descriptions. I mean, we know from local authorities that they haven't committed any serious crimes, because after all, this would be aggravating for them, for their situation. On the other hand, the thousands trapped here in Samos have to live somewhere. The camp that was created for 700 people can't accommodate 6,000 or even more. That's why they have climbed up the mountain, building whatever shelters they could to protect themselves. Living off the camp has caused problems with the accumulation of rubbish and rats, and started some forest fires that really distress everyone. And when I say everyone, of course, I mean the refugees themselves, because they are obliged to live under conditions that threaten their own lives. But most importantly, we think that the shameful agreement between EU and Turkey and the non-compliance to it, I think we will all agree that they are both equally shameful, both the agreement, I mean, and the non-compliance to it, has mostly affected the very people it was supposed to secure and protect. We know it from our contact with some of the refugees and the problems they are trying to tackle every day. They find themselves caught up, stuck in a kind of limbo with an uncertain daily life and an even more uncertain future. They feel unwanted. They feel that their lives are in constant danger. We might think that this situation doesn't affect the locals of Samos, but it actually does. The psychological impact on the population is evident, whether they are solidary to the refugees and immigrants or whether they aren't. The consequences of all the above are reflected in the solidarity expressions of the locals, of course. We notice, we as Movement for Human Rights, we notice a very reduced response to all our calls for help. And this is added to the already reduced solidarity that existed before. The only exception is some help coming from people and cooperatives outside Samos. Last but not least, I would like to mention the context of the COVID-19 pandemic and the confinement that the government imposes. This situation doesn't allow us to see the whole picture. For example, the negative reaction to the acceptance of refugee children at schools is reduced, but clearly schools haven't operated regularly in the last few months. They have operated with distance learning during most of the time. And under these circumstances, there are about 600 children, from what we know, that are away from every educational procedure and away from, excuse me, away from every opportunity of socialization with the local community. This way, they are deprived of the right to integrate. Here in Samos, this was added to the aftermath of the earthquake last October, and I get the impression that people are absorbed by their own problems and don't have room for other concerns, while one might have expected that empathy would increase under these circumstances. Generally, this is an insufferable situation for everyone. We as Movement for Human Rights consider these people to be part of the local community, but I'm afraid the biggest part of the residents of Samos don't feel the same. For all the reasons above, we believe that the only solution that can be offered to the grim situation created is political and institutional, because solidarity is useful and to some point important, but we consider it no solution, no permanent solution to the despair and dead end these people live in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irini. From Samos to Kos. Kos is another Greek island. There are currently less than 140 refugees in the hotspot that has a capacity for 816. There are extension works to create a closed control center, and the plan is that the capacity of the hotspot will be more than 3 times its current capacity for almost 3,300 people. So I asked Sofia Chatzifounda, who is a Kos resident and a member of Kos anti-fascist movement, How is currently the situation in the island for the refugees and regarding solidarity? Sofia.
Hello, congratulations for the initiative. And thank you very much for the invitation. I'll keep it short. I will try to describe the situation in the island based on the feedback and the information given by the members of both groups that have been involved in the support and the help given to the refugees, the asylum seekers and the migrants in the island, the anti-fascist movement and co-solidarity. Now, despite the announcements and the assurances which followed the agreement between the European Union and Turkey that the conditions for the refugees are going to be improved, today, 5 years later, the problems not also they have been multiplied. During the first couple of years, until the winter of 2018, the collaboration between the camp authorities and everybody that were responsible for managing the camp and the volunteers was fine, allowing the people inside the camp to have access to our help and our support. Amongst others, we were trying to support the integration of the people in the local society for as long as they were staying here, giving them courses to learn the language and helping them to have some activities in our social space so that they could spend more time while waiting for their requests to be examined. Of humanitarian crisis. When we started expressing more demands and requests, the collaboration became difficult and sometimes impossible. The requests were coming directly from the refugees, and they were related not only to their needs for accommodation or nutrition, but also for the need to work, to educate themselves, and also to have access to the health system. If it was difficult for them 5 years ago to survive, today it is 10 times harder to do so, since the pandemic had multiple impacts in the consequences while they are also detained inside the camps. And people that were staying in apartments, the most vulnerable ones, were asked to empty them and either return to the camps in Kos Island or the mainland, or to accommodate themselves. Something that is almost impossible because they didn't learn the language while they were here. They don't have jobs and they have created no relationships within the local communities to find somehow some type of support. Inside the camps, the number of people now has radically reduced the past couple of months. And we see inside the detention center, families with young children, and also people that are brought from straight sent and detention center, while the requests for asylum is still examined. Now, while we're having this situation inside the camp, that means a small number of people, it's around 170, with huge issues to overcome daily, and that are constantly growing. There is an extension of the camp ongoing with very little information about it, and with the authorities declaring that this camp is going to be empty and they are keeping it just in case something happens. So all the money are spent in this while we're facing other issues. In the meantime, the people that succeeded to get the asylum and finally have the right to stay here, when actually there is nowhere for them to stay, they need to find a place themselves without speaking the language, without having a job or any option of getting a job in the near future, and totally depending on the support coming from others. And this is the area where we are actually focusing in at the moment. Many of them, being unable to keep their apartments, they have decided to go back to the camp that they so patiently and with much effort tried to leave behind. This is here in the islands. We don't want any camps. We want organized communities where people can have a decent life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sofia. Now we can hear what Efi Latsoudi has to tell us about the deal, maybe details that we don't know about the deal. And I want to tell to the audience that you can give your own questions if you have for later on. Efi Latsoudi from RSA.
Good afternoon. I'm really sorry for the technical problems. I tried very hard to connect. I was supposed to give an introduction to the EU-Turkey deal 5 years later. And actually, for me, it is very difficult to talk about the EU-Turkey deal because when this happened in 2016 in March, what we really believed back then is that is a huge violation of human rights and of the asylum law, and that is not going to last long. And being in front of this phenomenon that this deal is still going and has some very concrete results after all this time. I must tell you that I feel that we are in a point that the deal didn't give the deal didn't it was not cancelled as we were expecting, and it's surprising. At the same time, now it's the time to understand what was and what it is really this deal. So what came with what happened with the EU-Turkey deal? We have the bypass of the asylum procedure. Turkey is considered as a safe third country, and refugees that the refugee situation is not, and we don't consider their situation according to the asylum law, but with the law of, not the law, with the deal that Turkey can be safe for them. So we have the border procedure. We have the ASYL that is taking over the asylum cases. And going to this point that the 18th of March that the EU-Turkey deal is announced in 2016, The same day, we have the announcement of the authorities that Moria is going to be a closed camp. So there is nothing new at this time. We are going back to we have a form of pushbacks and deportations that are happening since 20 years, for many years. And at the same time, we have one way to close the camp. And so whatever happened in 2015 with the solidarity movement is going back to an old and very known policy in Greece of detention, deportation, pushbacks. The day that the EU-Turkey deal was announced, we have the announcement of the closure of PIKPA back then in 2016, and any decent, let's say, facility and reception place for the refugee, and the announcement of the old Karatepe, which is again announced recently. We have people that there are boats are coming to Lesvos to take the refugees that they were already there before the 20th of March that the deal is starting to be implemented, and from this point on, the ones that are arriving are considered with the border procedure. So people that they've been, families that they've been splitted during their travel to Greece, they can be considered with the border procedure, half of them, and half of them they could be moved to the mainland because they arrived before. At the same time, we have still at the beginning of the EU-Turkey deal implementation in Lesvos, we have, because of the solidarity movement and the number of refugees arriving, there is attention of media on Lesvos. So we have the example of the visit of the Pope in Lesvos. When he arrives, all the media are there. There is a lot of police that is not allowing any protest against the EU-Turkey deal. There is only one banner that we managed to put, like Turkey is not a safe country. And the day of the visit of the Pope inside Moria, there are already some of the refugees, some cases that they got negative rejection of their asylum case, and there are suicidal attempts already, and one of them is a 16-year-old Syrian girl. So the media show from one side the success story and the big issue that is already there with the mental health of the refugees that is severely affected by the EU-Turkey deal, and we have many reports about that, and many reports about the also suicidal attempts of children. To keep it short, what is happening today, what we understand is that we have the xenophobia and racism and the extreme voices of hatred against refugees in the local society that are fed by the policies and the media. So we had the pogrom in Safou Square. We had last March dramatic violent events in Lesvos against solidarity people, organizations that human rights defenders, and against refugees. We have this dramatic incident of the Thermi port that refugee boat is stopped by the citizens and they are attacked and for many hours they're waiting in the water and they cannot land. And at this point there is so much hatred and violence that take us to the moment that we are now. What is happening now is that the policies, even though Moria was burned and does not exist, we have a replication of Moria in the Mavrovuni, and with horrible conditions. We have the promises of the government to create an invisible camp in the middle of nowhere in Lesvos, and the preparation and the work happening inside the local community is allowing now this kind of policies, and we are going back again to inhuman conditions, detention, and no visibility of what is happening with the refugees on the island. And at the same time, we have the pushbacks happening every day. We might not have the deportation through the EU-Turkey deal, but we have pushbacks happening in Evros, happening in Lesvos every day. And we have a society that can accept all these atrocities, and sometimes they even they are used. The rhetoric of the authorities is using the public opinion to implement all these atrocities. I try to keep it short because when we start talking about the EU-Turkey deal, it's kind of difficult to.
Latsoudi, do we have some more details about pushbacks? Can we talk with numbers?
We cannot talk with numbers because, as you know, pushbacks, many organizations now, when ProAsyl in 2007 for the first time reported pushbacks, it was the first time that we talked about this. Now many organizations, they try to follow up pushbacks. It's almost every day here. We hear incidents, we talk to people, but it's very difficult to overcome fear. It's very few organizations that have access to these people, and you know that at this point, when you are working in the camp, in the new Moria, Mavrovuni, you cannot talk about the conditions. So this is also another thing that makes it extremely difficult. Because I live the last months in Lesvos, I understand, first of all, it's like a war zone. There are military boats, Coast Guard boats everywhere. You can see them in the sea all the time. The Frontex patrolling and the helicopter flying over the beaches is a kind of war zone. You have this feeling. And when you meet people that, of course, they are very afraid to talk, but we are going back. In 2007, when I first heard about the pushbacks, I thought it was, a few incidents. But then every person we were talking, they were talking about 4 times of being pushed back, 5, 8 times. This is happening now again. We are going back to something that is very established in the Greek policy. And unfortunately, we cannot talk about numbers, exact numbers, but we know that it's happening a lot. And it's very, very dangerous, and we don't even know which people lose their lives in these incidents.
Thank you very much, Latsoudi. I think that we can now watch a video of Parwana. We had some technical problems, as you saw. Parwana Amiri is a 17-year-old asylum-seeker from Afghanistan, activist. She's in Greece with her family, and they are still waiting for their asylum interview. Are we ready? Watch the video.
Hello to all audiences and RSA team. At the moment that I am speaking about the pandemic condition in Ritsona camp, there are some infected people that are living together in the camp with us, but we are not informed about it. From the beginning of the pandemic, Ritsona has faced many times of quarantine for the residents, and most of the time, and in many of them, we didn't have any official declaration from state and authorities. We still don't know that how many people are infected. We don't know that who are infected, and that how can we be protected from those that are infected by a virus. Shortage of staffs and materials that we can protect ourselves and use them is one of the biggest problems. Now that all Greece is in quarantine, Ritsona is also in lockdown, but the restrictions is also only for the regions. That means we are not able to go to Athens, as it is located in 72 kilometers north of Athens, but we are able to go to the Halkida town. But the biggest problem is that we all don't know, and we don't have any information about the protection ways. And lack of information is one of the biggest problems that all the inhabitants are dealing with.
This was the first of the 3 videos we have. We can watch the second one right now.
In the beginning of March 2020, when the first quarantine was declared for Ritsona camp, and there were about 23 positive cases recognized in the camp, there were some hygienic boxes that were distributed by IOM, International Organization for Migrants, the team that were shared for the inhabitants. But at the moment there is no support about the hygienic boxes, about the protection ways, and the residents really don't have information. They don't know about the statistics and the number of infected people all through the town. This is the reason that many of them are not taking the protection ways serious.
Okay, this was the second video of Parwana. Let's watch the last one, the third.
For many, a life of the refugees in our mainland, in the camps in mainland, may seem that it is bitter, but no. A camp is not a place where refugees can feel themselves safe. A camp is not a place where the local community can have a better understanding of the life of refugees. It's not a place where we can be able to integrate. And the most important problem is that the children are excluded from the right of education. There are about 830 students, children, that they are out of school. We have gotten many empty promises, but we are still waiting to get this chance. And you know, if we are not able to communicate with local community, then how can we have a better understanding from each other? How can they know about us? And how can we, we reduce the levels and the, faces of discriminations and segregations that we are facing with? And that is totally hard. That even about the right to get access to education, we have to protest. The children are protesting for this right, and that still whenever there is a news about refugees, it is only telling about the problems that we have, the countries that we had to flee, but not the dreams that we want to reach to. But still I can see hope, and this hope doesn't come from corporations, state or government, authorities, or those that they are giving us empty promises. It comes from you, and your actions can make change. So our voices, our existence should not stay invisible. Thank you very much.
Parwana talked about many things that we can discuss later. One of them was the right of protests. We have a short video. It's taken by activists, a video of protest in Ritsona camp. We can watch it right now. Okay, we should remind that in Greece, most of refugees are out, children are out of school for about 1 year. And if I'm wrong, tell me. It's a very painful situation. Now, we can hear what Mr. Karl has to say. From the descriptions and experiences of people affected by the deal, its catastrophic impact is clear, I think. What is your view of the EU-wide impact of the deal, Mr. Kopp?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be together with our colleagues of RSA and people from the island, refugee who face these horrible conditions, not only on the mainland, but not only on the island, but also on the mainland. After this presentation on the dramatic impact of the toxic deal and the situation on the mainland of refugees on the mainland in a lockdown situation, let me try to give you in scant words, let's say a Central European perspective. We are outside, I live in Germany, my organization is based in Frankfurt, in the heart of Europe. So, and it's clearly that the whole misery is in the name of Europe. No? I don't want to whitewash the actions of the Greek governments, both governments in the last 5 years, but clearly everything that happens to refugees on the island and the mainland take place in the name of Europe, is financed by Europe. And in the last 5 years, there were many orders from Brussels and Berlin to keep the refugee deal with Erdogan alive at any cost. And one result is the fact that Greece has tightened the asylum law 6 times in this period. This is an expression of the European intervention. Very simplified, Giorgos already used the term, the Greek system is colonized. After the country was completely ruined by austerity policies, Greece was an easy catch for this cynical lab we face now since 5 years. After 5 years of live reporting from the dust of Moria, not from other camps, there is hardly any secret. The hardship is fully documented. Sometimes people are stunned by the question, how can billions of euros cause such a misery? Shanty camps, slums, the most expensive slums maybe in the world. Over 140 refugees, many kids have been injured and re-traumatized in this hotspot, cynical hotspot approach. Since in a nutshell, what is the EU-wide impact of the deal? For the EU, for the Commission, the German government, and others, it's a game changer. They call it game changer and success story. Success is for them when refugees stay where they are outside Europe. Those who make it to the islands face a life in hell. I think this was clearly documented by our colleagues. So the Aegean lab created a disaster, open air prisons on the islands. Giorgos described this development very well. The open island, the open air prison for both sides, also for the population, and destabilized the islands, fueled racism and put refugees and meanwhile also human rights defenders at risk. And in this situation of misery, there was never a fair asylum procedure in this chaos of the hotspot. This was not intended, but Efi mentioned these European actors who came to implement these high-tech artificial admissibility border procedures in a situation of totally desperate living conditions in the hotspot situation. So there was never a fair procedure. This was not intended, but it was presented to the outside world. The problem in the nutshell is also that the hotspot approach, the deal, is the blueprint for the future asylum system in Europe. If you read the new proposals of the EU Commission from September 2020, the so-called Pact on Asylum and Migration, you learn camps, detention center, border procedure, long period of detention, screening, asylum procedure under desperate situation is the future. This is the role model for a future asylum system, which is not related to asylum anymore. It's really a system to externalize responsibility, to shift responsibility to third countries like Turkey, which are not safe. So one component of this deal, if you already mentioned this, is the idea, and also Giorgos, the mantra of the EU, Turkey is a safe third country. The deal with now I would say with the dictator Erdogan was more important than an approach of rule of law. Turkey was never a safe country for refugees, and is not a safe country of origin. If we analyze the destruction of the rule of law, of democratic values in Turkey, we see this has a dramatic impact for those seeking protection in Turkey, and it creates many new refugees in Europe. 10,000 left Turkey and tried to get a refuge in Greece, in Germany, and other places in Europe. So Erdogan is never a partner for the protection of human rights. And the deal was and remains something like a nail in the coffin for refugee rights. And Moria, as you already stressed, is the symbol of shame. But Moria is not only a place, it's a concept, an inhumane camp system that is step by step more and more established throughout Europe. What the story makes even worse, that the deal was not created by the hardliners, by the Orbans, by the Salvinis, it was not in power at this time, or Sebastian Kurz. The deal was more created by the officially more willing concerning refugee protection in Brussels, Berlin, Den Haag, and elsewhere. So this creates additional frustration. All mainstream politicians find the conditions in the hotspots terrible. Buckets of crocodile tears were shed after delegation visits, but everything remains as it is, and the commission and the commissioner Johansson shouts no more Moria, and something worse came out. Karatepe knew, and then later we will get maybe a brand new co-managed European detention facility in the middle of nowhere, as Efi said, with maybe with a children playing ground, but at the end of the day, it's a detention center, it's an awful camp, and this is the potential future on the different islands. So they don't close short time the toxic deal. They want to revitalize this poisoning policy. And the Greek situation, to make this, because we discussed also the pushback story, when von der Leyen and the two other representatives of the EU were present in Evros in March, at the beginning of March 2020, with all the violent clashes and tear gas and grenades against refugees, von der Leyen, as you all know, said, okay, Greece is the shield of Europe. And this was the ticket for the Greek government to act with all brutality against those seeking protection. Thousands of pushbacks at the land and sea borders occur in 2020. There are no figures concerning pushbacks, but only one NGO made a documentation of close to 10,000 pushbacks in the Aegean. So today there are also pushbacks from the island, like in the Evros region. Arriving refugees have to hide because they have to fear being pushed back to Turkey. And here, in part, the circle closes. The Viktor Orbáns and the Sebastian Kurz have always demanded that Europe should be tougher on its own borders. Europe must be ready to produce ugly pictures itself. The suffering in the Morias serves as a deterrent at any price and creates ugly pictures, whom human dignity is not a matter. But the pushbacks, which violate key elements of refugee human rights protection, are now happening, as Efi mentioned, on a daily basis. The non-refoulement principle, the key principle of refugee protection and human rights protection, is violated on a daily basis in Greece, in Croatia, to Bosnia, Bulgaria, to Turkey, nearly everywhere. Every relevant land and sea border of the European Union. So to summarize this, the deal is the mother of all deals. We never should forget that there was another deal, the so-called Libya deal in 2017. Maybe a little bit, yeah, the most bloodiest deal, this cooperation between the so-called Libya Coast Guard and the EU and the member states. And the consequence of this deal is to send people back in torture camps. People were raped, women were raped, and this is happening in the name of Europe. And the question is now, if you summarize the beginning of the deal in Greece, the Erdogan refugee deal, the toxic deal, the 10,000s of deaths in the Mediterranean since 2015, the boat people returned to the torture camps in Libya, the pushbacks practically happening at all relevant external borders, sometimes shootings, the ill treatment up to torture of refugees in Croatia and elsewhere. So the last taboo, the question is, what else? Is there any taboo in the European deterrence policy? And let's say the glimmer of hope, there is also another Europe. Many people in Europe share the same demands of refugees, of you, and the initiatives of the island. There are still ongoing permanent demonstrations throughout Europe demanding evacuate the hotspots, close the camps, close the hotspot, refugee reception now. This solidarity movement has not become quieter during the pandemic. Hundreds of cities and regions in Europe are ready to take in refugees from Greece. We are all united and we demand, like our colleagues from Samos and Kos and Lesvos, close the hotspot, stop the toxic deal, create dignified reception conditions on the island, and then we need fast and legal onward travel of those seeking protection to other European countries. So in a very difficult situation, where everything is at stake, we together defend human dignity, the rule of law, the right to seek asylum, and we demand compliance with established refugee law principles, the protection against refoulement at the borders. We say no to a Europe of detention and refugee camps. We say no to this pact on asylum and migration, the EU blueprint from Brussels. Still, the European Union is founded on the rule of law, on human dignity, democracy, and human rights. And it's up to us together, all together, to defend these values. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will go back to the discussion about the children's life, or else how the deal affected refugees' children. So can you talk about it, Latsoudi, and what's going on with the education of these children in Greece?
The right to education in the camps does not exist. You know that the kids, they don't have access to formal education, and this is extremely important, because there are organizations that are talking, they were used to talk in Moria about informal education and activities and blah, blah. And now, again, in the tents, in the middle, in the mud, in the cold, they try to make informal education. There are more than 2,000 kids in Moria too, in Mavrovouni, and they are excluded from the right to education. And you know very well that many of these kids travel to Europe, risk their lives, because their parents had the dream of education. So this is the one thing happening. And we know, I mean, the MSF are talking a lot about mental health of the kids, because they are working on this. We had cases of kids withdrawing, kids that they didn't even want to play in this situation. We had rapes of kids, of a kid 3 years old in this camp, because, you know, it's good to talk about education, but education in which conditions? Protection in which conditions? We have to put some lines there. So these kids have no access to formal education, which is a right, and then we have the ones that they are outside the camps, that they still have some limited, with a lot of work from people that they are trying hard to put kids in the formal education, and teachers as well, and civil society. And then we have reactions, less in Mytilene now. There are about 260 kids having access to formal education, that they are living in apartments. And we had this case of Ipios, where they tried to create a high school class for 9 minors refugees, and there were huge protests. And actually now these kids are discriminated because they have access to school, but they cannot go to this in the same, you know, timetable. They go after the hours that the Greek kids have. And of course, when the parents were protesting, because they were not parents, all of them, they were also extreme right people. The rhetoric was they are not minors, they are over 20, they are rapers, and the school is for the Greek people. The rhetoric here on the island is very, very dangerous. And we know that From having access to education, to formal education, the society is having to deal with the people. And we see that wherever we have these examples, people are changing. Also, the locals are changing because the interaction makes the difference. They're living together.
Thank you very much. I would also want an answer from Irini and Sofia. How's children's lives in the islands, in Kos, in Samos, or Irini?
I just wanted to point out that the Greek Ministry of Education has just very recently hired teachers for these children to work in the EP schools, in these special schools created for them, because many people don't want them in school with their children, unfortunately. And it's just, for me, just shows how high in the agenda is the issue of inclusive education for the government and for the state. I'm a teacher myself, and I find this very, very, very sad.
Sofia?
It is a similar situation here in Kos, with the exception that we have information that children are kept in the detention center. So you know that we have both the detention center and the RIC, and there are families with minors kept inside the detention center. Go to, which is a supportive facility when children cannot go and have receive proper education in the local schools. Of course, in the past, when there were efforts that the children would go to the classes in the local schools, we had the locals trying to stop them from attending the classes. Kedu seems, in the eyes of the children, that is a more friendly facility outside the camp and outside the detention center. But now that the accommodation from UN has stopped, they are kept inside, and they were supposed to attend only. They do that without the equipment or anything, nothing or plan. It's all like words and decisions with no planning and nothing in place. So I would say that they are more stressed because they don't know what's happening. They're supposed to follow something, and it never happens.
It's time to end this.
Access to school. The kids in detention, they don't get access to school. They remain in detention.
Mm-hmm. I think it's time to end this interesting conversation. We want to thank all of you, all our guests, and all the audience for their interest. From today until the end of the week, we will be able to find the legal and the political text on RSA's website about the deal, the video of Ahmad, and the photograph exhibition of Giorgos Moutafis with the title "The Children of the Deal, No Fundamental Rights." I want to keep some words of Ahmad's short film. One signature, he says, can destroy people's future. And thank you again.